Good morning and welcome to Seeking Wellness, Our Bodies Explained on WPKN 89.5 FM. I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Pierre, your neighborhood naturopathic doctor and public health advocate, bringing you the best of what integrative medicine has to offer. We broadcast from Bridgeport, Connecticut on the fourth Saturday of every month from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Here on Seeking Wellness, we discuss various health topics and provide education from a clinical and integrative perspective. If you've missed any of our past shows, please log on to our website, wpkn.org, to explore our archives and podcasts. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. If you're new to the party, come on in, take off your shoes, and get comfortable. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I wanted that to be the focus of this month's Seeking Wellness program. This is my second show on mental health, with mental health making an appearance on other shows that I've done. It is one of my favorite topics, and I believe it is also one of the most important. My patients will tell you that I'm constantly asking about their emotional health and referring them to therapists. As a naturopathic doctor, counseling is a big part of my job, and this is one of the ways I get to the root cause of a patient's illness. I always say to other healthcare practitioners that your patients will not get better if you don't address their mental health concerns. In addition, I was a mental health counselor at a group home for MICA patients many years ago. If you're not familiar, MICA stands for Mentally Ill, Chemically Addicted Adults. I'm very well aware that there is a stigma in regards to mental health, and we as a society are suffering because of it. My hope is that in discussing mental health issues on my show, I'm doing my part to make sure that changes. Now that we are 2 months into the pandemic, how's everyone feeling? In the beginning, there were some who thought that this threat would only last 2 weeks. And I can tell you that I never believed that for a minute. My first career was in public health, many years before I became a physician. And in that training, I learned a lot about disaster preparedness, viral outbreaks, and bioterrorism. And from the beginning, I knew that what we were dealing with was unprecedented. What is public health? So many people now are familiar with this term. And I'm excited about that because for so many years, no one ever understood what I did. Recently, I read an article entitled, "Always the Bridesmaid, Public Health Rarely Spotlighted Until It's Too Late." Quote, "The U.S. is currently in the midst of both a public health crisis and a healthcare crisis. Public health includes many things a population takes for granted, like clean air, clean water, effective sanitation, food that is safe to eat, as well as injury prevention, vaccines, and other methods of ensuring the control of contagious and environmental diseases. In fact, it is public health, not advances in medical care, that has accounted for most of the increases in life expectancy during the past 2 centuries. Well before the advent of antibiotics and other 20th century medical interventions, public health activities around clean water, food safety, and safer housing led to enormous gains. Because the public health system mostly operates in the background, it rarely gets the attention or funding it deserves until there's a crisis." End quote. This was an opinion article, but I agreed with so much of what was said in the article. And to be honest, I feel the same way about mental health. Mental health, in my opinion, is largely ignored unless a crisis occurs. But thankfully, I believe the tide is changing. I've seen so many discussions and posts about self-care and being concerned about your mental health in the wake of this pandemic, and that is sincerely encouraging to me. So how do we cope with this virus? How do we manage all our feelings around what's happening? Many people have had to come to terms with the fact that this virus isn't going anywhere anytime soon. In the beginning, there was this immense fear and anxiety, and some people are still experiencing that. But I remember people were losing their minds, literally stocking up on toilet paper. And now, a little over 2.5 months in, I believe some people are actually throwing caution to the wind. I still see people outside without masks and not observing social distancing, all while it is very clear that we are not out of the woods yet. To date, there has been 96,000 deaths in the United States alone, 23,000 deaths in my home state of New York, in contrast to 3,600 deaths in Connecticut, all proving that staying at home really does work. The purpose of staying at home is to slow down the spread of the disease. It doesn't mean that people won't contract COVID-19. It just means that we need to be able to slow down the rate so that we don't overwhelm our healthcare facilities. Our hospitals, our clinics, it's just too much at the same time. And unfortunately, this is what happened in New York. The reality is we have to get back out there someday, but it should be done cautiously. This week, Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont decided to postpone the opening of hair salons and barbershops until June. I personally believe that was a wise decision. I think reopening too quickly can send the message that we are ready to get back to business, which can create a false sense of security. The reality is we are still coming to grips with our new normal, and there are still so many unanswered questions. So how do you know if your mental health has actually been affected? I think this is almost impossible to not be affected at all, but I will say that each person can present and cope differently. If you are noticing any of these symptoms, your mental health has probably been affected. 1. Fear and worry about your own health and the health of your loved ones. 2. Changes in your sleep or eating patterns. 3. Difficulty sleeping and or concentrating. 4. Worsening of chronic health problems. 5. Worsening of mental health conditions. And 6, increased use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. It is important for us to recognize that just because all of our attention has shifted towards COVID-19, chronic health diseases and pre-existing conditions have not gone away. If you listen to my last show where I talked about COVID-19 and how it has spread, you already know that chronic disease puts an individual more at risk to an adverse outcome when they contract COVID-19. What is unfortunate is that people do not believe that they can do anything to change that risk, and this is not the case. It is possible to improve your health, and in doing so, you can actually reduce the risk of mortality if you contract the disease. Along with pre-existing conditions, there's been so much conversation about that. But we also have to think about habits that we have. Smoking, for instance. Smoking weakens your lungs' natural ability to defend you from illness. And people who smoke tobacco or marijuana may be at greater risk of getting seriously ill with COVID-19 because it mostly affects the lungs. Along with some of those not so great habits, let's talk about some general recommendations for your overall health that take into consideration mental health. 1. Take breaks from the news and social media. From a personal perspective, I stopped watching the news many years ago because I found it to be toxic. I know people feel like they need to get information, they need to stay well informed, but research actually shows that the healthiest way to obtain your news is through written words. So newspapers and magazines are much less salacious as far as how you are going to get your information. And to be totally honest, even though I don't watch the news, I still find out a lot about what's going on through social media, which sometimes isn't necessarily the best way to get information either. 2, eat a well-balanced diet. So many different ideas out there about what is a good diet. I've talked about that on previous shows as well. And for me, plant-based diet is number one. That's my bias. That's what I see that works. Once my patients go to a plant-based diet, they do so much better. And I've seen many, many, many health conditions improved focusing on a plant-based diet. This does not mean that you have to be a vegetarian or vegan, but it does mean that the majority of your diet should be plants, vegetables. We don't eat enough vegetables. What's great right now is there's so many amazing vegetables in season. I'm probably eating squash 4 out of 7 days of the week. It's wonderful. There's so many health benefits from eating vegetables. So please, 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 if you are not consuming a majority of vegetables in your diet, please make that change. That's one change that you can make that can improve your health immediately. Another thing that you can do is establish a routine. Right now, so many people are working from home, so it's important to create a routine that you can follow. For instance, when you're home, make sure you make your bed, get dressed, just like you're going to work. It's been seen that when people actually go through those motions of taking on the actions like they would when they normally would go out for work, that helps your mental status. So seeing your bed made, getting dressed, putting on a cute outfit, all very helpful to your mental state. While you are home, make sure that you're taking breaks. If you're sitting at a desk for a long period of time, make sure you take breaks to walk around, go outside, get some fresh air. And while we're talking about fresh air, exercise regularly. Now the weather is actually improved. It's much better now. There's actually some sun, which I'm super excited about. So now that there's some sun, everybody's excited to be outside. So get outside, just do some walking. There's so many ways to get exercise in and to do it safely. If you know you're going to be around a lot of people, please wear a mask. Please wear some sort of face covering and keep your distance from others. Another great idea is to get plenty of sleep. So many people struggle with sleep. I've actually seen an improvement in sleep with many of my patients, not in the beginning of the whole COVID pandemic, but actually now. So many people have changed their routine. They're not working the same schedules anymore, and they're making sleep a priority. Rest is important for the immune system. Many people are learning about that now, which is great. Really important that you get the rest that you need so your body can defend itself against any kind of foreign invader. I mentioned this earlier. Please avoid excessive alcohol and drug use. Many of my patients have actually admitted to me an increase in alcohol over this time period, just trying to bear through all the uncertainty. It's one thing to have a little drink here and there, some wine, which actually does have some health benefits. But if you're noticing that your alcohol consumption has increased dramatically, or now you're thinking of turning to drugs to cope, means something else is going on and you're definitely being affected mentally by what's going on, and you may need some help, professional help. And lastly, connect with loved ones. It's so important to call loved ones, Zoom calls, whatever you need to make sure that people are okay. Many people have anxiety about loved ones, but they don't actually pick up the phone to call them, and they just get so stressed out and build up so much anxiety. Just pick up the phone, talk to someone, even for a few minutes. Many people think they're bothering someone when they're doing this. You're not. Everyone wants to hear from loved ones in their family. So please make sure to make it a habit to keep in contact with your loved ones. It'll make such a difference in your life. You are listening to Dr. Jennifer Pierre on Seeking Wellness on WPKN 89.5 FM. We are discussing coping through the pandemic in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. Let's talk about some special populations which may have had a different response to the pandemic. Older people and people with chronic diseases who are at higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19. This is definitely a population that we have to be concerned about, because from the very beginning, that was the first group that everyone was talking about that was most at risk. So imagine how those people in that group are coping with their mental health, constantly being reminded that they're most at risk. Secondly, children and teens. Children and teens have different ways of expressing their emotions that may not be as clear to adults who are dealing with them. It may require more probing. It may require having more conversations, starting conversations with children and teens to figure out where they are and how they're managing through their mental health. Another group that's considered a special population is people who are helping with the response to COVID-19. Doctors, for instance, other healthcare providers like nurses, first responders, the people who are on the front lines of this disease. We've heard so many stories about how these healthcare providers have been affected, and sadly, we have started hearing about suicides. When you think about the people who are dealing with this outbreak, not having answers, feeling helpless, we get into healthcare because we want to help people. And if you are a healthcare provider and you feel like you can't do this, that's a lot to carry. It's also a lot to carry to see these deaths over and over and over again. Finally, a special population to consider is those who already have mental health conditions, especially those with substance abuse. I mentioned that earlier. Being careful about how much alcohol you consume. This is a very triggering time for people who may have already dealt with substance abuse issues. Let's get into children a little bit. So here are some behavior changes to be aware of in younger children. If you notice excessive crying or irritation, that could potentially be something to be aware of. If children have returned to behaviors that they have previously outgrown, for example, this could be bedwetting or toileting accidents. Noticing if your children have had excessive worry or sadness, just not being like themselves. If your children have had unhealthy eating or sleeping habits that are foreign to what they normally do. Pay attention if your child is acting out, especially if they're teenagers. And yes, that is a part of being a teenager, but I'm talking specifically about things that just don't add up and they're not in line with how your teen normally acts. Irritability, poor school performance, or even avoiding school, difficulty paying attention and concentration. And this shouldn't be confused with the difficulty that so many parents are having right now, homeschooling their children. Kids are all over the place. I'm not talking about that because honestly, it's our new normal. It's not as easy to understand how to homeschool your child or figure out the right routine. That's going to take some time, and many people are dealing with that. If you notice your child is avoiding activities that they previously enjoyed, that can be a sign. Unexplained headaches or body pain. This is a huge one for kids whenever they're dealing with mental health issues. And finally, if you notice that your teen is starting to use alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, definitely a red flag and may warrant some mental, emotional help, some professional help. Family counseling, individual counseling will all be helpful. And overall, I'm going to say that with a lot of these groups, I am a big proponent for mental health counseling. I believe it's extremely important. I believe it's very helpful. And I believe that everyone needs a counselor. And especially right now, people don't necessarily know what to do with their emotions and feelings. Many people can express that to family members, but a lot of people don't have family members or someone close to them that they can trust and share. And it's a process to find a therapist that you can connect with or feel comfortable with. And I always remind patients, do not give up. The next population we're going to talk about is older adults. We talked a little bit about older adults previously, but older adults and people with disabilities are actually at increased risk for having mental health concerns such as depression. Mental health problems in this group can present as physical complaints, headaches, stomach aches, cognitive problems like not being able to concentrate well. And unfortunately, doctors may be more likely to miss mental health concerns among people with disabilities due to a focus on treating underlying health conditions compared to people without disabilities. In older adults, depression can be mistaken as a normal part of aging. Let's talk a little bit about quarantine. Many people have had to go through quarantine as a result of COVID-19. And I myself have spoken to a few patients who have recently emerged out of quarantine, and they talk about how it can be very isolating, all the emotions they deal with during that period. I just like to clarify, many people have stopped using the term social distancing and instead are using physical distancing instead. And the difference being that physical distancing is just talking about how we should maintain that 6 feet apart distance from each other, just to, decrease the likelihood of spreading COVID-19. And social distancing can seem a little isolating, so many people preferring not to use that word, especially in light of all the mental health issues that people have been dealing with. So whichever term you choose to use, understand that it doesn't mean that you can't reach out to people for help, and that you are encouraged to spend time with loved ones. And thank God for technology. Technology has allowed us to communicate in so many unique ways, in that people do not miss out on some of the things that they hold so dear, like birthday parties and weddings and baby showers. I've seen so many examples of this, and it's so exciting and beautiful to see people continue with the traditions that they would normally do outside of this pandemic period. So those who have just come out of quarantine, this can be very emotionally triggering, and they can have mixed emotions, including relief after being in quarantine. Some people 14 days, sometimes having to go through quarantine twice. In the beginning, there was a lot of confusion about how long the period should be, and that really wears on people. In quarantine, many people have fear and worry about their own health or the health of their loved ones because they can't see them, they can't be around them. The stress that they experience monitoring themselves or monitoring others for signs and symptoms of COVID-19, literally waiting for the ball to drop, waiting to see if someone has a cough or if they're asymptomatic or any of the other symptoms that are associated with COVID-19. There can be sadness, anger, frustration, because friends or loved ones have fears of contracting disease from them. Sometimes the person in quarantine, may not even be clear if they're contagious or not. These individuals also have guilt about not being able to perform normal work or parenting duties. And unfortunately, they feel like that other parent has to bear the brunt of all the work and all the care at home, and that they're not able to help out. They also can have other emotional and mental health changes. And children may feel upset or have strong emotions when someone they know has been released from quarantine, wondering why was mommy or daddy gone? Why was this person not around? And they have to navigate through those emotions. We talked briefly about the first responders. Unfortunately, I feel like healthcare providers were really, really good at pushing through, not the best at realizing when we're in pain or when we're struggling. And for any of the healthcare providers who may be listening to the show, especially those of you on the front lines, we thank you for your service. We ask that you make sure that you're okay as well. Take care of yourself. It may be very difficult, but remember, your life is important as well. Acknowledge that a traumatic stress can impact your family. This is traumatic. Dealing with this, watching so many people die, watching so many people be sick with this disease and feeling helpless. Learn some of your symptoms, whether it's fatigue, illness, mental health, feeling like you're feeling guilt or feeling withdrawn or your own fears. Everyone has fear around this. I remember watching some stories on social media about people who had traveled from other states to help out in New York, and how they wanted to really make a difference, and how it really tore them apart just seeing people die and all the difficulties in trying to come up with solutions on how to treat the disease. And it really broke them down, and they didn't really have an outlet to speak about that. So recognize those emotions that you're feeling. They're normal and they need to be expressed. Allow time for you and your family to recover from responding to the pandemic. I also read another story about a couple in New York. One gentleman, he's a doctor, ER physician, and his wife is a restaurant owner, and how they chose to live in separate places during this crisis, and she's actually pregnant, and how difficult that may be on them to be separated during this very special time, and how he's missing out on some of these moments. And they do spend a few minutes a day seeing each other, but they're also observing that 6 feet apart distance. So some of the emotions that they may be dealing with have to be explored. Create a menu of personal self-care activities that you enjoy. This can be spending time with friends and family, exercising, reading a book, whatever it is that helps you decompress from what you've seen at work and allows you to just think about something else so you're not always on work mode. Make sure that you take a break from media coverage of COVID-19. Ask for help if you feel overwhelmed or concerned that COVID-19 is affecting your ability to care for your family and patients. The next group I'd like to talk about, going along with that, is some of the stigma and how that may be affecting certain people and their mental health. So we talked about the first responders. I remember hearing stories about first responders going into supermarkets and people becoming upset. I guess they were afraid of being infected by the first responders. I thought this was really, really sad to hear that they were being treated like that. I think people came to their senses and this wasn't happening as much. But this is a group that can experience stigma as people who potentially can infect others. It's unfortunate, but this is what, we were hearing about. Also, people who have traveled. So maybe if someone had traveled from a certain country, they may have had some stigma placed on them. And lastly, persons of Asian descent. By now, I'm sure we heard horrible stories about people of Asian descent being attacked. Even the language that was in the media around a Chinese virus and how people thought that every Asian person was carrying this disease. And it was really, really disheartening to hear some of the stories. And unfortunately, when people are afraid, it's like they lose sense of truth. It's like they lose sense of understanding. We have the facts, and of course, none of this is true. It's all false. Your race does not make you more likely to transmit the disease. We don't have any information on that to believe that's true. And as I mentioned before, those people with pre-existing mental health conditions are also a group that has been stigmatized. And it's important that this group continue with their treatment and be aware of new or worsening symptoms. You are listening to Dr. Jennifer Pierre on Seeking Wellness on WPKN 89.5 FM. We've been discussing coping through the pandemic in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. If you weren't already aware, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I wanted to draw special attention to how we're dealing with our mental health during the pandemic. In the previous half hour, we discussed different populations that are of utmost concern during this pandemic, including children, first responders, older adults, those with disabilities, and those currently coming out of quarantine. So there's some great information about how those populations can get the special help that they need. And I wanted to share in this last half hour some more resources that can be helpful. So I already gave many suggestions on general recommendations that can be helpful for everyone and helpful for those populations specifically. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about self-care practices. You've heard me talk about self-care on this show. I'm a big proponent, big fan of self-care practices, and I use self-care practices all the time. Not always when I need to, but I do use them, and I make sure that my patients do, and I'm very adamant about it. So I wanted to just touch on some self-care practices that may be helpful. I'm going to list some things out, and if you'd like a copy of an article that has all of these self-care practices on it, you can download this article off of my website, drjpierre.com. Firstly, one of my favorites, meditation and prayer. This is a wonderful way to set an intention for how you want your day to go. Number 2, exercise. We talked about this already. Exercise helps increase the flow of oxygen to your brain, helping you feel more awake and energized. Even 15 minutes a day makes a difference. Getting fresh air. Sunshine makes us happier. Even if there's no actual sun, the fresh air is invigorating. Thankfully for us now, the sun has come out, so make sure you spend time outside every day. Journaling. This is another thing that my patients hear me talk about all the time. I'm a big fan of journaling, and there's so many different ways to do it. You can use a journal to get the toxic thoughts out of your head. You can just scribble. You can look into free writing. There's no rules with journaling. It's really to get thoughts out of your head, and it's a great way to deal with emotions. 5, make one small change to your diet each week. Talked about this before. One simple thing that you can do is make sure you eat more vegetables. I mentioned I'm a big proponent of plant-based diets, and increasing the amount of vegetables in your diet can do wonders for your health. For those of you who enjoy long, luxurious baths, make sure you take a bath once a week. It's a great way to decompress. Draw a bath, add some essential oils, light a candle, and you can create your own personal Zen oasis. Number 7, indulge in a massage or spa treatment. I know, right now we can't necessarily do that, but if you have a loved one at home with you, they can help you with a massage, or you can get one of those portable massagers that you can use on your shoulders and upper back. Dance. You've heard the phrase, dance like no one's watching, put on some music, dance around the house. This is a wonderful way to decompress. When I first started working from home, I wasn't playing any music. I just was kind of, okay, got to get in my flow, need to focus on business. And I noticed that starting to put music helped me feel a little bit more relaxed and less stressed out. Number 9, watch a funny movie. This is a great way to lighten your mood. Laughter is so healing. And number 10, splurge on something sweet for yourself. This can be something you always wanted. It doesn't even need to be very expensive. This action is a demonstration of love and kindness to your soul. Again, you can find this handout on my website. You can download it. I have it in the About Me section. Next, we're going to move into some financial resources. By now, you all have heard about the CARES Act and all the iterations of the CARES Act. So the CARES Act serves to provide financial assistance for both individuals and small businesses. Now, I know that so many people right now are dealing with the stress of their finances. And this is a huge reason why people are stressed out and dealing with anxiety. Not being able to know how you are going to pay your bills and take care of your family is an issue many people had prior to COVID-19 and the pandemic. So think about those people. If there's someone in your life that you know that you can help, that you can gift something to them, that you can pay one of their bills, that you can donate to certain organizations, please do so. Otherwise, if you are someone who's struggling financially, there are tons of resources out there that can help you. One in particular that I learned about was needhelppayingbills.com. This is an organization that helps people who need help paying bills, exactly what it says. There's some information on assistance programs, charity organizations, and resources that help people pay their bills, take care of their mortgage, and debt relief. Wonderful resource to check out. Please, if you are struggling, please tell someone. Also, churches are a great resource in the community. If you are part of a church or any other religious group, please contact someone that you trust at your local religious affiliation. They are so helpful in knowing local resources. Please do not be ashamed to reach out to someone. No one wants to feel like someone they love is struggling and struggling silently. Next, the topic is grief support. As a result of the magnitude of this pandemic, everyone by now has either lost someone or know someone who has lost someone. Two organizations I learned about recently, Carson's Village, and they're at carsonsvillage.org. This site is great because it provides families with a place to create web pages so that they communicate with loved ones, share funeral service information, and accept donations. Another organization is griefshare.org. This is a site that allows you to find local grief support networks. I already checked it out, and there are many groups listed there in Connecticut who are currently providing online grief support. Be sure to check them out. So these organizations were carsonsvillage.org and griefshare.org to make sure that you're receiving the support you need if you have recently lost a loved one. Other mental health resources that are helpful, virusanxiety.com. I love this site because so many people have had anxiety around this virus because we don't know much about it. The site has amazing resources. It has meditations, which I mentioned before is one of my favorite things that can be very helpful to deal with anxiety. Also, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, known as NAMI, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. NAMI currently has a You Are Not Alone campaign, which features the lived experience of people affected by mental illness to fight stigma, inspire others, and educate the broader public. They are currently using the hashtag #NotAlone. Please be sure to call the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-6264 for mental health resources. I will tell you that their website, absolutely incredible for mental health resources. Please be sure to download it. Again, all this information I've listed in the resources section of my website. And lastly, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 for free and confidential emotional support 24 hours a day. Please, 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 if you need help, do not be afraid to call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. We want you to be safe, and we want you to make sure you are being attended to. You are listening to Dr. Jennifer Pierre on Seeking Wellness on WPKN 89.5 FM. I just finished talking about some resources that may be helpful. One was a self-care practices handout that I have on my website on the resources page, drjpierre.com. I also have information about grief support and some other mental health issues, so please be sure to check that out. For the last part of our show, I have a little treat for you. I wanted you to indulge me in a deep breathing exercise. Deep breathing has been extremely helpful. So many studies about breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and I just wanted to share a breathing exercise that can be very helpful. And this can be done while you're sitting, while you're at home, working. Everyone's working from home now. I talked about the importance of breaks, but I really want people to focus in on their breath. Our breath is our anchor. Our breath helps to steady us. Our breath helps us get through very difficult periods. So I wanted to share something that's very special to me, something that has been helpful to me. And also, if you didn't know, I was a yoga instructor for many years and also teach meditation. So as a result, I have seen the benefits in my patients, and I wanted to share that in today's show as well, since we are talking about mental health. So to do a breathing exercise, it's generally recommended that you sit in a chair or someplace that you're comfortable, feet on the ground. That can be very grounding. And the most important thing is to make sure you're in a space that's comfortable, quiet, and relaxing. If you, as I mentioned before, if you are working from home, this is a great exercise that you can do in between clients, or if you are in telemedicine, you can do this in between patients. And learning how to breathe helps your body become oxygenated, helps you be more calm, helps you think clearer. So that's what we're going to be doing. As I mentioned, sit in a chair, back straight. And many times I ask people if they know how to breathe. Many people take it for granted, but breathing is not something everyone knows how to properly do. So the breath that we're doing is inhaling through the nose and exhaling out of the mouth. So inhale through the nose and exhale out of the mouth. Sometimes when people are learning how to breathe like this, they get dizzy. So if the pace is too fast, slow it down or stop and take a few breaths. Take a moment and start again. We're going to do a very simple exercise. I generally recommend that people close their eyes, but if you have any trauma or fear around keeping your eyes closed, you don't have to keep your eyes closed, but it definitely helps. Again, your breath is an anchor. Sit up straight. Inhale through the nose. And exhale out of the mouth. Again, inhale through your nose. Exhale out of the mouth. Again, inhale through the nose. This time I want you to hold the breath. Inhale. Hold. Hold. Exhale. Again, inhale through the nose. Hold. And this time I want you to forcefully exhale out of the mouth. How does that feel? Next, I want you to picture as you're inhaling, so many people feel like they have no control over what is happening. So I want you to picture yourself breathing in what you can control, breathing out what you cannot control. When we're meditating or doing any sort of breathing exercise, we have the tendency to start thinking about other things, right? Things we're anxious about, things that happened in the past that are stressful, things that bother us. So that's okay. Use that in this exercise. Breathe in what you can control, breathe out what you cannot control. I want you to picture that. Let's begin again. Inhale, hold, and exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, hold, exhale forcefully. And I want you to sit here for a moment. Notice how you feel. Do you feel more light? Do you feel more grounded? Again, think about how your breath is so important. As I mentioned before, your breath is an anchor. Don't get frustrated about what you can't or cannot do right now. Remember, it's your breath that you need to get you through your day, to get you through the difficult moments, and it's what will help you get through this pandemic. We will get through this together. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the show. I hope you found these resources helpful. I'm Dr. Jennifer Pierre. Be sure to follow me at Dr. Pierre on Instagram, Dr. Jennifer Pierre on Facebook, or on my website, drjpierre.com. I know this is a different format for us. Usually I enjoy getting people to call in and we have these discussions. So we're doing things a little differently, of course, because of our new normal. But I'd really like to get some feedback on what you'd like to hear on our next show. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to contact me on any of those social media platforms. I'd love to hear what you think about the show. I'd love to hear what you want to talk about next. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Please be sure to check out the website wpkn.org for past shows and meet us right back here, same time, same place, on the fourth Saturday of the month for another informative topic. Enjoy your weekend and stay healthy.